What shall I play today? Hello again, everybody. My name is Ryan Clementz, also known as RMCSquirrel on Board Game Geek and other board game media. Now, this video will be part of a challenge where I try to play 365 different games by the end of the year 2021. That is a lot of games. But as of the end of March, I am now ahead of the curve. I played 29 games for the month of March, which brings my total over 100. I love that sound. Back to the task at hand, what I did was for the games that I played in March, I organized them from my favorite to my least favorite. And this is the list of the top 10 of those games. But if you'd like to see what other games I played this month and where they ranked, you can check the description below. With that being said, here's number 10. Last month in the number 10 spot, I had a game from the publisher What's Your Game? And that game was Zhangguo. This month, I also have another game of theirs in the number 10 spot. It was designed by Marco Canetta and Stefania Nicolini, and that is Railroad Revolution. You're playing as a startup railroad company that's trying to expand from the East Coast to the West after the passing of the Pacific Railroads Act. Now, there may be stocks in this game, an economy, and there may also be track laying, but it's not an 18xx game. This is an action selection game where on your turn you're going to place a worker on one of 4 different spots, whether you want to build train stations, lay track, trade, or help support the Western Union in their goal of becoming the first transcontinental telegraph company by building offices for them. You also get bonus actions depending on the color or job of the worker that you place. For example, on the lay tracks action, if you use an orange accountant worker, then all the tracks that you build cost less. Also, on the trade action, if you use the gray negotiator, then you get your own personal deal that nobody else can join in. When you build a train station on the map, or when you build an office for the Western Union, if you're the first one to do so, then you get additional benefits, which gives this game kind of a racing feel. You have personal goals to complete, end of game scoring tracks where you get to decide how your scoring is by moving your discs up whichever track you want. Money is tight. I could go on, but the gist of it is this game is a really well put together, tight, economic kind of Euro game, and I really enjoy it, and that's why it's my number 10. This next game is actually a game I hadn't played in a while, but when a friend asked me to teach it to him, I accepted. He loved it, and for good reason too. This is a dice action selection game, and it's designed by Virginia Gigli and Simone Luciani. It is published by Lookout Games, and it is called Grand Austria Hotel. You are a prestigious hotel owner with an exquisite cafe inside. Your goal is to attract many important and very, very exclusive guests into your hotel by offering them foods and drinks to eat, wine and dine them in essence. And what you're trying to do also is after that happens, you want them to stay at your hotel. Be the best hotel to do that amongst your rival opponents, and you win the game. Before we continue though, let me get the one gripe I have of this game out of the way, and that is you should never play with 4 players. You'll hate it. Well, maybe hate is a strong word, but you'll instantly regret it as soon as you have the round token marker that says you play on the first turn, and then the 8th turn. Yes, you heard me correctly. There are 6 turns that happen between yours, and those turns are not short either, so you'll just be dragging along and waiting. With that out of the way, there are still many great things about this game. On your turn, you can choose a guest to add to your cafe, and then you get to pick a die. Depending on which die you pick, you get a couple of different things. You can get food, you can get drinks, you can hire staff, you can open rooms, you can get money, you can get some emperor's favor, whatever you decide. But the strength of that action depends on how many dice of that number are rolled. For example, the number 3 dice represents opening rooms. So when you choose to get a number 3 die, how many rooms you can open depends on how many number 3s were rolled at the beginning of that turn. So after you've fed them their fancy strudels and given them their coffee, you can entice them to stay in your hotel. You need to have an open room with the same color as the color of the card that they're on. So for example, you need an open yellow room in order to place a yellow guest there. So you have a prestigious hotel and you have honorable guests. Is that all you need? Actually, it's not. You also need the Emperor's Favor, and that's represented by a track in the middle of the community board. Now at the end of the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th rounds, you'll get points based on how far you've gone up the Emperor's track. You'll go back a few steps after that, and then you'll either get rewards if you're still in the positive, or you'll get penalties if you were lagging behind. That's not good. Either way, this is definitely a game that you need to check out. Get it? Check out? Because, guests in a hotel. Never mind. Anyway, that's my number 9 Grand Austria Hotel. You have been a wretched, horrible person for most of your life. What better thing to do with you than toss you overboard from a ship? Well, that's what happens. But instead of drowning, you end up being washed ashore onto this unknown land. With this newfound prospect of life, you want to try to gain your honor back. And you do that in this game, which is my number 8, and that is Vindication. Vindication is a board game designed by Mark Needlinger and published by Orange Nebula Games. In this game, you'll be moving along a grid map made of hexagonal tiles, which represent locations on this island. You can stop by these locations to gain attributes such as intelligence, strength, and inspiration, which can be converted into more powerful traits such as courage. Do you need some help and guidance while you're on this island? Well, you can stop by the inn and you can hire a companion. They'll help you out along the way. Also, if you feel like you're going too slow, stop by the command post and upgrade your steed. You'll go fast as lightning. Maybe, just maybe, if you defeat enough of the bad evil monsters on the island, or if you gain enough good traits for yourself, then you might have enough conviction to become vindicated. At the beginning of the game, there is one endgame trigger, but something unique about this is that while players are playing and they progress on the points track, they'll pass thresholds that'll add another endgame trigger. This will keep on happening until someone actually achieves one of the goals on one of those trigger cards. There are tons of cards, there are plenty of modules, and just so much content that this makes this game really replayable, and I enjoy it so much, and thus it's my number 8. Here's the scene. You're walking along, going shopping in the market, or just, enjoying some time with your friends along the shore. Until this happens. But something like that actually did tragically happen. But it's your job to try to clean it up. And that's what's happening in this game, my number 7, Lizboa. This game, designed by Vital Lacerda and published by Eagle Gryphon Games, is a simple game. You play a card and you do what it says. Kind of like Concordia, right? Come on, it's a Lacerda game. Of course it's not that simple. No, it isn't that simple, but it's not too far from it. You do play a card and do what it says, but then afterwards, depending on where you play that card, you can do a few other things. For example, if you play the card into your portfolio, then afterwards you can go visit nobles and do a few actions depending on what you choose, based on the goods that you have remaining. If you don't choose to go after the nobles, you can instead sell to ships, whether they be yours or an opponent's. Alternatively, you could play a card to the royal court, and depending on what kind of card that you play there, a few things might happen. For example, if you play a king's card there, then you have to spend influence in order to visit the king. Then you can choose one of 2 of the actions that you normally would have to pay for, but instead you get it for free. And then finally, you're forced to take an action, such as build a public building. Just hearing me talk about it, it sounds like a lot, and it kind of is. But the gist of the game is the earthquake in Lisboa has caused a lot of issues and damage, and you're just trying to clean it up, build some shops, build some public buildings, try to get the city back on its feet. Not to mention, the artwork in this game is fantastic and it's done by Ian O'Toole. In fact, the art for every game I've mentioned so far is incredible. So if you just want to play the game based on that, that's fine too. Just know that you're in for a difficult game, but it's really satisfying when you finish it. That's why it's my number 7, and that's Lizboa. This next one is a game that I actually put off for quite some time, obviously all the way until now. This game was so popular, especially amongst solo players, and I'm not really a solo player, and so I didn't think it would be for me. It's also very, very puzzly, which I do like, and eventually I decided to give it a shot. This game was designed by Eric Russ, and it's also published by Greater Than Games, and this, my number 6, is Spirit Island. In this game, you and your fellow players are playing as spirits, and your island is about to be invaded. You need to defend the island from these invaders cooperatively. This is a pure, puzzly, strategic, cooperative game. There are plenty spirits to choose from. Some are offensive, some inflict fear, which drive invaders away, some defensive, you name it, there are plenty of good choices. When it comes to your turn, you want to try to get as much presence out as you can onto the map board. That way you can play more cards and gain more energy per turn. Also, after you play your cards, you'll activate them depending on if they're quick cards or slow cards. Quick cards activate before the invaders, and slow after. Now when it comes to the invaders' turn, they get to do a couple of things. For example, they can attack. When they attack, they're going to do damage not only to the land, which causes plague, which removes your presence, but they're also hurting the Dahan, and that's a tribe that's been on that island for a long time and has grown accustomed and friendly towards you, the spirits. Another thing the invaders do is build, so they're going to build towns or cities in places that they have. Also, the last thing that they can do is explore. Now this is unknown information because you're going to flip a card at the end, and whatever location type that it shows, you're going to start putting invaders there. So yeah, put some presence on the board, inflict fear on the invaders, help the Dahan defeat them in battle, and ultimately win back the island, and you win the game. So I only played this at the introductory level, however I am 100% certain that I'm going to be playing this again with multiple different spirits and multiple different setups, and I look forward to it. And right now, it's my number 6, but I'm sure that'll go up as I play more. Have you ever wanted to be Indiana Jones? Well, I have. He's got some great jackets. Anyway, a couple of brand new designers named Min and Elwin took up this challenge and published a game with Czech Games Edition, and that game became known as The Lost Ruins of Arnac. This deck building and worker placement game sets you as an archaeologist, and you're searching an uninhabited land for artifacts and the location of the lost ruins. But be careful, you might find artifacts where you are, but the Guardians are going to come find you. Whenever you dig out a new site, a Guardian will appear, and you can either try to overcome it or run away fearful. But if you do manage to overcome the Guardian, they will provide you a boon, which is a one-shot effect that will help you out. You can use your hard-earned money to buy tools. They have effects that'll help you on your journey. Also, if you get enough exploration tokens or compasses, you can use them to obtain artifacts, which have incredible effects. Either way, now that you've dug up quite a few artifacts, you can use them to research where the actual lost ruins are. On the right-hand side of the board is a research track, which you're going up with your magnifying glass, and when you reach the top, then that means you have found the previously lost ruins of Arnac. I like how in this game you're trying to extend your turns as long as possible, because there's only 5 rounds in the game, and the first and second one usually go really quickly because you don't have that much to start with. But as you start getting more resources and you're starting to get more powerful effects, then your turn extends longer because you're only playing one card to get a lot of resources at a time, and so I really like how that puts together. So I applaud you, Min and Elwin. This is a really, really good first design for you guys, and I'm looking forward to more if this is what you're starting out of the gate with. So that's why currently Lost Ruins of Arnac is my number 5 this month. On February 18th this year, a major scientific event happened when the rover Perseverance landed on Mars. 1 month later, on March 18th, I decided to play a game designed by Vitalis Serda and published by Eagle Gryphon Games that also has a rover on Mars, and that game is my number 4, and that is also On Mars. In On Mars, you are the chief astronaut/engineer that's trying to create an enterprise on Mars to make it self-sustaining so that life can survive. To do so, there's a couple of things that you have to understand. For example, you need minerals in order to create power. You need power to build a plant that produces water. You need that water to grow plants, and those plants produce oxygen, which is used to sustain life. On your turn, you only get to do one action, and that depends on where you are. You can either be in orbit in a space shuttle that's around Mars, or you can be on Mars, and so there's a few things you can do there. You can also do an executive action once on your turn, before or after your main action, and it depends on what you have unlocked. Some executive actions are on your board, while some are unlocked by doing advanced buildings, and there's also scientists that help you with these executive actions as well. So there's a lot of things intermingled into this game. While you're building this up, your colony level could increase depending on how many of each different kind of building that you have, and that's signified by the LSS ship, or life support system, which goes up when you complete certain things. So the end of the game is triggered depending on where this LSS ship is located. So for example, there are 3 mission goals you can complete, and at the beginning of the game you can complete all 3 of them, and that triggers the end of the game. But let's say the LSS ship was located on colony level 2. That being the case, it reduces the amount of mission goals that you need to complete to trigger the end of the game by 1. So you only need 2 at that point. So, Vital Lacerda, my man, this is the second game of yours that's on my list this month. Also, I've only ever played 2 of your games, so that's saying a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing and trying more of your games. So that's why this game is currently my number 4, because I do like it a little bit better than Lisboa, and that's just my opinion. And that's why Lisboa is my number 7, but this is my number 4, and I'm looking forward to playing more. This next game, my number 3, has a lot of sentimental value to me because it's one of the first games that I played when I started my board game tenure a couple years ago. The art is fantastic, and later on I found out that the artist of the game was also the designer, and that is going to be Above and Below. The publishing company Red Raven Games was also created by the artist and designer, and that's Ryan Clementz, and he created this beautiful illustrated world called Arzium, and that's where Above and Below takes place. So the premise of this game is that your last village was ransacked, and so you gathered everything that you could get and you left in hopes of finding a new place to develop a new village, and you have. At the same time, you found an underground vast cavern filled with amazing adventures and treasures, and so this game is centered around that whole thing, where above you have your village and below you have these caverns. So on your turn, there's a couple things you can do. You can hire or recruit more villagers by moving over and exhausting one of your villagers that has a feather symbol, such as training. Another villager could build if they have a hammer symbol on it, so you move it over and you spend an amount of money to build a new village that could give you some benefits, or it could produce goods. The other thing that you can do is you can go explore the cavern. Now this is where I believe the heart of the game is, because Ryan Clementz is so good at storytelling, and that's what really captured me into this game, was the amount of storytelling that he did. So someone else is reading an encounter for you, and you're just imagining things that are going on, and you can interpret it how you will and have some fun with it, and this is just fantastic. I'm getting a little excited and ahead of myself, so let me actually explain a little bit more detail what happens here. So you're going to send a minimum of 2 people down into the cave, and there's a cave card that has encounter numbers depending on the roll of a die. You're going to roll the die, and whatever die number it says, that's the encounter that you will do. So rolling a 2 could end up with you doing encounter number 364. Yes, there is a lot of encounters. Now another player is going to read that encounter for you. It's going to be a short story about what happened when you went into that part of the cave, and then you're going to have a few choices that require a certain amount of power, and those are represented by lanterns on your cards or the villagers that you sent down there. So you're going to roll dice, and depending on the threshold of the dice, that could give you a certain number of lanterns. So a villager could give you 1 lantern if you roll at least a 2, or 2 lanterns if you roll at least a 4. You're going to assign the dice, and that determines the total that you have. You can also go from exhausted to injured for each villager in order to increase that number by 1. And depending on the threshold that you've reached, you get a certain amount of goods or a certain penalty depending. Assuming that you had a successful encounter, that part of the cave is now considered explored, and you can add it to your village underneath, as in below. And instead of building buildings above ground, you can now build outposts below. So now you're going to do this, and the end of the game is triggered after either 6 or 7 rounds depending on the number of players. And there are plenty of ways to get victory points based on reputation, on if you did good or bad things down in the cavern when you met with people. You could get victory points based on certain buildings that you have. Certain buildings give you victory points based on certain conditions. There's also victory points based on how many resources or types of resources that you collected. There are, I think, 8 of them. So you're going to add all this together, and whoever has the most victory points wins. It's a fantastic game. I love Ryan Clementz's game. I played almost every single one of them. I can teach almost every single one of them, and I'm looking forward to Now or Never, which is his next release that's coming out. But for now, Above and Below is my number 3 for this month. This next game is actually sitting at my number 7 game of all time. I have definitely played this plenty of times before. This is a game that's published by Eggertspiel, and it was designed by Virginio Gigli and Flaminia Brasini. And this is a wonderful game based in Portugal, and it is called Coimbra. Coimbra has a very unique and elegant dice drafting mechanism. You're going to roll these multicolored dice so that different results show up on the dice, and you're going to draft 3 of them. Now, depending on when you use the dice, it's either going to rely on the number of the die or the color of the die. The first phase of the game is only going to be looking at the number on the die. In player order, you're going to be placing your dice out into these city locations, and then you're going to rearrange them in descending or ascending order depending on where you place them. And then, after everyone is done placing their dice, they're going to be removing them in that order and taking actions. Most of the actions have to do with taking a card from that city location and placing it in your tableau. Each of these cards is going to advance you on certain tracks, and it's also going to give you a benefit of some kind, whether or not be an immediate effect or an effect that happens later in a round at a certain point. Later on in that round, you're going to be doing an income phase, and the income phase is what's looking at the color of your dice. Using an orange die will give you money income, and using a gray die will give you guard income. Both of these things are used to gain cards, and it's also used to pay for a spot on one of the voyage cards, which are the end of game cards. Using a green die will give you victory points depending on where you are on that track. And using a purple die will allow you to move your character around the terrain map around Coimbra and get various things from around there. After 4 rounds of this, the game ends. Whoever has the most points wins. Just like any good traditional Euro, there are very, very many ways to get points, and it's just fantastic. This is one that has beautiful art as well. Art is done by Chris Quilliams, who also did Alma Mater, another game designed by this Italian duo team. I love this team so much. I've played a couple of their other games. Alma Mater, I'm sure, is going to be high up on one of my future lists because I have yet to play it this year. But other than that, Coimbra stands as my number 2 this month, my number 7 of all time, and let's go on to number 1. Dressmaking. Yeah, dressmaking. That's what this game is about. My number 1 game is about dressmaking. But it is such a fantastic Euro with deck building, and I just fell in love with it the very first time I played it. It's designed by Matthias Kramer and Stefan and Louis Malz, and it's published by Eggertspiel, and this game is Rococo. The biggest, most lavish banger of a party is about to happen, and everyone wants to use your dresses in your coats to go to that ball with, along with the coats and dresses of your opponents. So you'd better do well, because in the end, whoever did the best will be the most prestigious dressmaker in all of France. This game is all about choices, and at the beginning of the game you start with 5 employees in hand, but unlike other deck builders, you get to choose which 3 cards of those 5 that you want to use for that round. Every card has an action printed on it, and when you play it for your turn, you may do that action. Also, you can do a main action on the board depending on the kind of employee that you play. For example, an apprentice is unable to make dresses, but they can gather supplies for you, such as thread and lace. Like I mentioned before, this game is practically all about making choices. One such choice is, when you gather supplies, on the top of the tile is linen of different colors that you may need to make dresses with, or on the bottom is lace and or thread. So when you gather one of these supplies, you have to choose whether you want the linen or the thread and lace. The other thing that you have to choose on is after you make a dress. So when you make a dress, you have the option of either selling it to get money, or you could rent it out to a party member. When you do that, you place it on the board on the dress side, which has victory points, which you'll get at the end of the game. Now, when you place it, you also have a choice of what hall to place it in, because there's different halls in the game. And this is a set collection majority aspect of the game, where at the end of the game, you're going to get more victory points if you have more dresses in that hall. You're going to need a little bit of help during this game, so you will be hiring employees. They give exponentially better benefits throughout the course of the game. Also, if you're short on cash, you can vie for the Queen's favor and she'll help by financing you. Also, who said you only have to make dresses in this game? No, you can also fund decorations and music and fireworks. So you can fund statues, which give you points at the end of the game based on your sets of different colored dresses. You can fund the fountain displayed in the front of this mansion, which will give you income at the beginning of every round. You can fund musicians, which helps you with set collection and majority for every hall in the game. Also, last but not least, you can fund the fireworks. At the end of the game, everyone that's in the King's Hall, or the tallest or highest hall in the game, is going to move up into the fireworks display, and their amount of points that they give you is going to multiply. So at the end of the game, all of these points are added together, and whoever is the most wins. I love this game so much. It's such a fantastic game. All the choices that you make, the slight deck building aspect of it with a really cool twist. It has set collection. It has a bunch of the points that I love when it comes to board games. I am expanding what I enjoy about board games by playing a variety, but this still stands as one of my favorite board games of all time. It is my number 4 right now. That could change, you never know. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and it made you think about playing games that you might not have played before or haven't played in a while. Again, the other games that I played are in the description below in case you're interested. Broadening my horizons and the different mechanics of board games is what got me into trying this. And now that we're at the point in the pandemic where most of my friends have received their second COVID vaccine shot, I'm sure we'll be playing a bit more in person. And that'll help me get into some games that are only really good in person, such as war games. So you might expect some of those in the coming months. But until that comes, I thank you very much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.